Okay, hopefully you guys can see me again. We're back. Okay, yeah, I tried to swap to a different scene collection and OBS crashed, so. Okay, give me a sec. I'm going to close out the various programs involved in this. Oh, it thinks it's there twice. Okay. It's actually good timing with the credits there. Okay, I'm gonna put on some quick music and load up the project and all that. Like I said, I mainly just want to kind of demonstrate what I'm talking about. I don't think I'm gonna do a proper coding session at 3:30 a.m. Not that I haven't or wouldn't or have anything against it, just not tonight. However, let's get some music quick. YouTube, chill step. Okay, there's some light music. I'm gonna hope that anyone else who may be interested has, refreshed or whatever. But like, here's what I have so far with my 3D game. I'll show off this and then one more demo scene quick with a number of basic mechanics in place. Let me quick... I kind of want to turn off visualization of... The cylinder around me is a visualization of a sensor. This is meant to be a door. You see in the left there where it says sensor 0, sensor 1, that means that I'm actually colliding with this thing. Which might not look very impressive because it isn't very impressive, but I coded it up to work with any kind of rotation and with certain optimizations in place. But anyway. No, god damn it. So let me quick open up that class and let me just not draw it. Make it a little clearer. So like what I have so far is I can run around on the ground, hooray. I have some basic shadows and stuff in place. I guess it'll be kind of hard to see because the light's coming in from the wrong direction, but I can wall jump like all the way up this thing if I want to. Or like wall jump way over here. I also just have wall control, like I can kind of go side to side. And you see how the player's falling more slowly on the wall. I don't think it should be quite this slow in the final product, but come on, Pixel. But that's an example of physically unrealistic behavior that ends up being more fun most of the time. Gives you a little better wall control. And there's my little spinning windmill blades. And I can actually wall jump off of them as well. And further, I can actually have wall control on these objects. See that? So that's what I'm talking about, where if I go to my moving platform class, and do the following. You can see that if I actually land on this moving platform, it will... Okay, I'm stuck on a weird spot or something, but... One sec, let's try that again. It's not perfect. That bug is actually not my fault, believe it or not. It's a known bug, but I don't know the best way to resolve it yet. There we go. So now I'm on this platform, and you can see that as I move around, I should stay on the same relative position on this platform, along with following the rotation as it moves. And I'll actually maintain velocity too. It's not moving very fast right now, but I'll maintain velocity. So yeah. If I also go ahead and load up another scene, the demo. Pixel. There's a little more in here to play with, I think. Same moving platforms there. I have a ladder which is partially... Okay, it's broken. Actually, no, I know why it's broken. Because I recently made tweaks to manual control, but I can run around on like arbitrary triangles on the ground, you know. This is another good example where I'm going to draw you a very accurate picture. Why in the hell is paint so small? So here's my very accurate picture. So here I am standing on a slope, right? If you do something like this and imagine that you view this slope at a side angle, here's my slope. It looks like this. I'm exaggerating the slope, but it's something like this. And meanwhile, the bottom portion of the capsule actually looks like this. Again, I'm blowing it up for scale, but it actually looks something like this, you know. And then you would have, and this is the capsule continuing upward. You can see that if I were like coming straight down and landing on this slope, it's actually not the bottom center point that hits the slope first. It's one of these side parts, because that's just how geometry works. If I have a hemisphere on the bottom, some portion other than the exact bottom will hit the ground first, unless the ground itself is completely flat, which can't be guaranteed in the game that I'm making. So there's actually an interesting effect where if I draw that circle again, as this circle is falling down, it will hit this first. There's actually custom code to ignore that collision and ignore this one and this one and this one until the exact bottom center crosses the plane, and it's only at that point that you latch onto the floor. So that's what I mean where I'm still using the physics engine to perform those raycasts and such, but I have custom code to resolve the collisions, and that allows me to get better control over what's going on. Similar logic applies to walls as well. Actually, it's a little more complicated on walls, but here's a bridge. It doesn't really work yet, but like I said, this bug is actually not my fault. I feel like I have to defend myself. Anyway, so that's that. Or here's another good example. So you see this wall here? This, the way I have my code set up in the engine right now, every single triangle, you can see the triangles drawn out in yellow. Every single triangle is classified as one of three things. It's either a floor, or it's a wall, or it's a ceiling. And that's just based on its angle. So like this is a floor, you know, this is not exactly flat, but it's flat enough to be a floor. All of these things are also flat enough to be considered a floor, even though they're pretty angled. You know, obviously that thing up there is a ceiling. But this is still classified as a wall. Actually, it might be a ceiling. But the point is that I want to hit it. So the way that physics engines generally work, again, we'll take a kind of side view of this collision right here. If you imagine the walls as, that's not a line, as something like this and then something like this, and the player standing in the middle, the way that physics engines work, at least the way this physics engine works, is first it detects collisions and then it resolves them. So what's going to happen, pretend that this is the player. It's not a capsule, but it's close enough. If the player is on the ground and comes into here, it's going to detect two different collisions. You know, it's trying to resolve something that's kind of impossible, because it's trying to put the player in this position on the floor, but it's also trying to resolve this collision on the wall. And when collisions are resolved, they're generally resolved based on the shortest vector available, which means that the appropriate way to resolve this slanted collision, the top one, would be to do this, right? You would move it down and out, like on a line that's using a vector that's perpendicular to the wall. Does that make sense? And that doesn't work. The reason is that it would drill me into the floor and it would cause all kinds of problems. And as you can imagine from the geometry of it, this problem becomes worse the steeper the slope that you're running into. Now, you could fix this through design. You could just make absolutely certain that, like, you know, every single corner in your entire game world doesn't have this kind of acute angle. The problem is that that doesn't really work either. First of all, it's probably hard to enforce that without making your world look much more blocky than it could. You know, it would end up looking like a voxel game. But also, the same problem occurs in reverse. So if you had this, right, and this is the floor again, and the player does this, the game is going to try to resolve the player up and out, and it's going to kind of awkwardly put you into the air. Like, if you had this resolve using real physics, it would just kind of not work. So what I do is actually something custom. And I'm not going to claim that my approach is, you know, the end-all of correct approaches, but to me, it seems like a pretty correct approach to take. I haven't developed other games. I don't know how they do it, but the way I do it is that there's actually custom code. The player character knows when they're on the ground. You know, this thing here is the ground. And so step one, and I'm going to exaggerate the movement. Imagine that in a single step, if first the player's here and they aren't hitting the upper wall, then they do this. You know, they're deep inside it. In practice, you wouldn't move that fast, but if you did. First, the collision engine detects that that collision, and it's going to try to say, okay, you need to resolve this vector you need to move this body like this, in this direction, to get it out. Right? But I can't do that because I'll drill into the floor. So I actually have custom code that projects this vector back out in the direction of the floor, like this. Let me try to put it in the correct spot. So that instead, and again, this is physically unrealistic behavior, at least based on how the physics engine would behave if I didn't intercept it first, such that I take this, I project it back outwards based on the normal of the floor, and that results in you seeing what's happening here. It's a little bit jittery, so pardon me for that, but you can see that I'm kind of stopping and remaining mostly flat on the floor. Again, the jitter is a separate problem, but it's mostly stable. And it works on these too. These walls are not perfectly vertical. They're almost vertical, but they're not perfectly vertical. And the same thing applies. Yeah, I will do that. In fact, I'm going to make a note to myself. Highlight the game dev thing on Twitch from late Saturday night. Oh, hey, Twik, what's up? I don't know, probably, but it depends if it's good or not. I'll decide that after it comes out and is stable for a few days. Yeah, so that's how I do things. I can actually show you that code. Here's my player character class. And this is going to be complicated, so don't worry about all the garbage that you're seeing here. But I'm trying to remember exactly where I put that. I think it would be in the... Would it be in the post step? You know what? It's down in the ground controller class is what it is. Yeah, resolve grounded collisions. Here it is. It gets better because this just describes a collision against one wall. You can actually... I don't think I have a perfect example of it in here, but it's pretty easy to imagine walking into a corner on two walls that are both slanted towards you, and so you get this problem twice. And then it's a whole different thing. You have to do this correction. First you detect both collisions, then you so first you detect both collisions, then you correct the resolution vector to point in the direction you want. Pretend that these two lines are perfectly parallel. And then you have to make sure that the two corrected resolution vectors don't intersect with each other, which you solve using projection. And if what I just said doesn't make sense, well, hopefully at least conceptually makes sense. So like what's happening here is that before any of this happens, I go through and I manually check all the contacts. A contact in this context is the information that I described here. It's the information that says a contact occurred, a collision rather occurred with this thing, and here's the penetration depth and a normal to get it out. Instead of actually acting on that, I capture all of it, and then I manually loop through and resolve the vectors. And it's and one other thing I'll say before I kind of finish up is that if you're looking at this and you're thinking that the math sounds complicated, it kind of is, but if it makes you feel any better, I didn't like immediately know how to do some of this math. I definitely had to do a bit of Googling around on projection and stuff to make it work, but now I think I have a pretty good handle on it. Yeah, Shafe, but and here's the other interesting thing is, like, this is the approach that I'm taking. Again, I have never worked at a AAA studio or anything. I don't know what the accepted practices are, but this works for me. It works for me in the sense that it gives me the fidelity of control that I want, such that once I, clean it up and make it really, really solid, I will hopefully have a game that feels really good to control, which is obviously the objective. I don't know that a lot of games go to this trouble, to be honest. And my evidence for that is that a lot of games just don't feel very good to control. But like I said, I can't know for sure without looking at their code. Projection in this context is a linear algebra term. So when I apologize if this is too dumbed down for you. I don't know your exact level of experience, but a vector is just a line pointing from one spot to another like this. So projection, imagine that this is my first vector, right? And then this is my second vector, like right about here. Projecting means that you kind of cast the vector down onto the other one. So you see this here. If you take a perpendicular line from this blue one and point it right about, I'm going to try to make it pretty perpendicular, right about here. Right here, the purple vector projected onto the blue vector gives you a resulting vector of the red one. So in this little drawing right here, the red vector is this purple vector projected onto the blue vector. Like geometrically, that's what it means. You might reasonably ask why you would want to do this, which is a different question, but this is what projection means. Yeah, that's basically what it is. And so that's what I mean where I'm going to quick draw my other example. If I have a floor that looks like this, and then a floor that looks like this, and I have a resolution vector which points like this, right? That's where the body would have moved. Thank you. What I want to do is, rather than pushing my circle out in this direction, I want to project this vector. So here's the line. Here is a similar line. Let me make it blue so the colors are consistent. This line is meant to be parallel to this ground right here. What I want to do is, rather than pushing out the circle here, I want to project the purple vector onto the blue one like so, and that gives me a resulting vector that looks like this. And this is the actual one that I use to resolve the collision. That's why projection is valuable, and it's used in a lot of different situations, but this is one application of it. Pro tip, if you want to do game development, especially 3D game development, but it applies to 2D as well, refamiliarize yourself with linear algebra. You use it a lot. Like vectors and points and matrices and stuff. You don't actually have to understand the matrix math, but you have to understand how to use them. Oh, and as for whether you can clip through walls in my game, probably. But right now it's relatively stable. Yeah, this is a known bug. It has to do with the ray casting. For some reason, the ray cast can return true and then give you a normal of vector 3 0, but I'll fix that later. Anyway, the purpose of me doing this and bringing this up was to reiterate something that we were discussing during the last Ori Rando Seed, which is that if you want good character control in your game, and good is, subjective, but if you want character control that really feels satisfying, you generally have to do these kinds of tricks. You can't, again, I use terms like can't. You can do whatever the hell you want, but if you rely on the pure physics engine to resolve all your collisions, it'll probably feel really weird to move around. You'll probably be able to clip into shit. It'll probably feel floaty. There will probably be some visible jitter. It probably won't feel very good. Yep, trigonometry as well. Just SOHCAHTOA. Remember SOHCAHTOA, and you're like 80% of the way there. But yeah, that's where like all the code I have here. Well, I've been doing this for a while, so for me it feels pretty second nature. But you get better at it, as you spend more time doing the stuff. Here's my wall jump. See? Woo! Here's another example of physically unrealistic behavior: coyote jumping. Ready? I can still double jump as long as I jump within a quarter second of running off an edge. So they're slow, I only get one jump, but if I do quickly, I can still get both jumps. So, yay. But yeah, I can highlight this and send it to you if you want. Again, I want to reiterate, I am confident in my own abilities, but I've never worked for a game studio. I've never released my own video game, so don't treat what I'm saying as gospel or as the only correct way to do things. This is how I am doing things for the requirements of my game. And the requirements of the game that I'm making is that it's a 3D adventure with arbitrary meshes. The ground isn't necessarily flat, it can be curved. Walls aren't necessarily perfectly vertical, they can be tilted. Platforms aren't necessarily still, they can move and they can rotate and do weird bullshit. And that's not going to be true for every single game. And there are probably other approaches which can also get you satisfying character control, but this is the approach that works for me. How you implement slope physics? I will happily explain that. It might be too large a topic to explain right now. But what I can tell you right now is, first of all, don't feel bad that you're struggling with slopes, because slopes are just a bitch. They really, really are. And as for how you handle slopes, it's going to depend on a lot of specifics about your game. It's going to depend on what you need to do on slopes. The 10-second version of what I'm doing here is that as my little guy moves around, I'm actually tracking which triangle I'm on the ground. And then whichever direction I'm moving, forward, left, whichever direction I'm moving based on my input and on my camera, I move along that triangle, and then every single frame I'm actually doing downward ray casts to detect when I transition to a different triangle, like from this one to this one. But I'm always tracking the triangle that I'm on, or if I run off of a triangle, I start falling. And the benefit of doing that as well is that because I know the triangle that I'm on, I actually know the slope. So for example, right now I'm just kind of running, but what I could do is say this slope right here is steep enough to cause a slide. So I could say when the player character moves from here to here, start sliding instead. And that's why I'm going through all this effort of putting in all this manual code, to manage all these different kinds of physics interactions, is that it gives me the flexibility. It is a lot of work, but it gives me the flexibility to implement these kinds of features really reliably. Yep, Tyler is the person that I was thinking of talking about it. He posted a thread the other day. That's awesome though, Shafe. Yeah, that's it's one of the coolest things about game design. I could go on about this forever. there's a really interesting melding of design versus functionality. For example, like moving platforms are, and I have them working pretty well right now. Well, I missed it. Let's try that again. I have moving platforms working pretty well right now, but they are complicated. It was not trivial for me to make this work, believe it or not. So if you are designing a video game from scratch, right, and you're saying, uh-oh, I don't know how to do moving platforms, they're really complicated, you have two choices. You can either sit down and figure out how to do them, or you can say, you know what, we're just not going to put any, by design, every single moving platform in the game is just not gonna rotate, it's not gonna move. You know, so you can solve your problem by just designing around it instead. Oh yeah, hey, you want to see something fun? Check this out. Let's make this go a little faster. Nah, how about 8? Right now I preserve velocity off of a platform. So now it's going to move really, really fast. Step 1, I have to land on it, which is not that easy when it's moving this fast. The exact bottom center of my little capsule has to cross the thing. So I'm trying to land on it. It's kind of hard. Hold up, I'll get it. Okay, God, no, stop that. I'll get this. Yeah, and this stuff is complicated. Although I've never released a video game, for a bit of my, I guess, credentials for what it's worth. Oh my god, I'm so bad at this. Okay, wait. Please. I'm just trying to land on the idiot platform. It's so fast. Alright, come on. Son of a bitch. Come on. Please. Believe it or not, this is working correctly because I still haven't been able to land on the... Okay, there we go. Okay, it's still broken, but there's me maintaining velocity. So my moving platforms aren't perfect, but they're doing something anyway. I could teleport myself. I just was too lazy to sit down and do that. But yeah, I mean, this stuff like is... It is non-trivial, you know. So that's I think something that the reason I'm mentioning this is that I struggled with this for a long time. I would see these features in games, and they seem so easy. But the reality is that if you play a video game, even if it's something like Ori that has really smooth controls, you don't know how difficult it was for the programmers to make that all work. For all you know, they were pulling their hair out and feeling like they were jackasses who didn't know what they were doing. It's like it is complicated. And like now I've spent enough time with it that even though I have a lot of work to do, I feel pretty confident in how I'm doing it. But if you're feeling like this is really complicated and I don't really know where to start, that's okay, because it is difficult. If it was really trivial, then every single game would have really good movement. And anyone who's ever played a video game can tell you a lot of games don't have very good movement. Or they might have decent movement, but only because they have extremely simplified level design. You know, like they don't have these kinds of slopes and stuff that mine does. Anyway. I like talking about this stuff. I should really probably go to bed. It's almost 4 a.m. and I'm pretty tired. But, Zerla, I will try to remember to highlight this tomorrow and I'll send it to you. And if you have other questions, you can just feel free to ping me as well. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Cool. Okay, I'm going to end stream and I'll just let AutoHost take over. Have a good night, everyone. Or good day if you're not American and you're ahead of me in your time zone. Have a good one.